At 36 years old, Novak Djokovic finally breaks the silence he has carried through years of triumph, controversy, and relentless scrutiny. The man who dominated tennis like a force of nature, who outlasted legends and shattered records, now chooses to reveal something far more personal: the 5 people he hated the most during the most turbulent years of his career. It is a confession no one expected, not from a champion molded by discipline, endurance, and an iron will. But why now? Why would Djokovic, a man trained to suppress emotion, to rise above conflict, to endure the hatred of crowds, suddenly open the door to the shadows he has kept hidden? Insiders whisper that Djokovic has carried these names like scars, etched deeper with every scandal, every headline, every moment the world misunderstood him. And now, the time has come. Here begins his list. 5 names, 5 stories darker than anyone imagined. Number 1. Scott Morrison. Among all the conflicts Novak Djokovic faced in his turbulent career, no single person left a deeper wound than Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister at the time of Djokovic's infamous 2022 deportation scandal. Unlike rivals who battled him on the court, Morrison confronted him on a global stage, with political power, public pressure, and a coldness Djokovic would never forget. The conflict began the moment Djokovic landed in Melbourne. What should have been a triumphant return to his most successful Grand Slam instead became a diplomatic battleground. But insiders say the escalation only reached its peak when Scott Morrison personally stepped before the cameras and declared rules are rules, signaling that Djokovic's visa would be cancelled, before any legal due process had taken place. To Djokovic, that moment felt like a blow far worse than any defeat he ever endured. He wasn't just being denied entry, he was being publicly shamed by the leader of a nation he had given 9 championship trophies to. Witnesses inside the Park Hotel detention facility recall Djokovic watching Morrison's press conference in silence. No anger, no outburst. Just a long, hollow stare, the look of a man realizing he had become a political pawn. He felt betrayed, a member of his team later revealed, not by Australia, but by the man running it. The court battles, the headlines, the global media storm, they weren't just obstacles, they were humiliations. Each statement Morrison made tightened the noose, painting Djokovic as reckless, dangerous, irresponsible. And even when public pressure mounted, even when the legal fight grew murky, Morrison stood firm, insisting Djokovic must leave the country. When the final decision came down, Djokovic boarded the plane under heavy surveillance, a world number 1 treated like a threat. The bitterness didn't come from the deportation itself. It came from the fact that one man, with a single televised statement, turned a tennis champion into a global controversy. Number 2, Roger Federer. To the world, Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer were opposites destined for greatness. One the elegant artist, the other the relentless machine. Their rivalry shaped an era, split fan bases, and created a global debate about what greatness truly meant. But behind the applause, Djokovic carried something heavier than competitiveness. A deep, private resentment toward Federer, born from years of feeling dismissed, underestimated, and unwelcome. From the moment Djokovic emerged as a real threat, insiders recall Federer viewing him with a cool distrust. He didn't fit the mold, one former ATP insider revealed. Federer saw himself as the guardian of the sport's tradition. Djokovic was the disruptor. The crowds followed Federer. The sponsors followed Federer. The commentators worshipped Federer. And Djokovic? He became the outsider trying to overthrow a kingdom built long before he arrived. The early years left scars. Federer was polite in public but often sharp in private. Subtle comments in press conferences, tone shifts in interviews, moments that Djokovic never forgot. He felt Federer wanted to keep him in his place, a coach later said. Novak felt unwelcome in Federer's world. Then came the matches, the endless, suffocating battles on the biggest stages. Wimbledon became the cathedral of their rivalry, and the 2019 final. Insiders say the match changed Djokovic forever. He won, against the crowd, against history, against a destiny that seemed written for Federer. But instead of celebration, he heard boos. Instead of admiration, he saw sadness in the faces around him. He felt like an intruder, one Serbian journalist recalled, a man who stole something he was never allowed to touch. Federer's fans often framed Djokovic as the villain, and slowly, painfully, Djokovic began to believe it himself. The resentment grew not from one moment, but from a lifetime of being overshadowed by Federer's legacy, elegance, and global adoration. Number 3. Andy Murray. On paper, Novak Djokovic and Andy Murray were supposed to be brothers in arms, two players born in the shadow of Federer and Nadal, two warriors fighting for survival in an era that rarely left space for a third, let alone a fourth titan. But beneath the smiles, the shared jokes, and the public respect, Djokovic carried a deep, unspoken resentment toward Murray. A resentment built from parallel careers, stolen opportunities, and a rivalry the world never fully understood. Their paths were eerily similar, same age, same generation, same obstacles. Yet while Djokovic rose, Murray was often portrayed as the sympathetic underdog, the tragic hero, the man whose misfortune the world mourned. Insiders recall Djokovic privately complaining that the media favored Murray's suffering while criticizing his own fire and ambition. He felt judged, one former ATP press officer admitted. Like Murray was allowed to be emotional, but Djokovic wasn't. Then came the finals, the endless, grinding, emotionally draining finals. Australian Open, Wimbledon, US Open. Time after time, Djokovic would arrive as the favorite, and Murray would transform into a different creature, fierce, relentless, fearless. The 2012 US Open final stung deeply. Murray's victory wasn't just a win, it symbolized something Djokovic hated, the possibility that Murray, not him, could have been the defining champion of their generation. But the wound that insiders say Djokovic never fully forgave was the 2013 Wimbledon final. Murray's victory was historic, legendary, Britain's first male champion in 77 years. The world erupted. Headlines celebrated Murray as if he had conquered Olympus. And Djokovic? He stood there, applauding, invisible in his own defeat. For Djokovic, Murray represented the opponent who reminded him that greatness wasn't guaranteed, that destiny could be stolen, even by someone he considered a friend. Their relationship was courteous but tense, respectful but brittle. He felt overshadowed, a coach later confessed, and Novak doesn't forget moments where he feels erased. Number 4. Nick Kyrgios. If Rafael Nadal wounded Novak Djokovic on the court, then Nick Kyrgios wounded him in public, with words, mockery, and a level of disrespect Djokovic had never faced from a fellow player. Their tension was not born from rivalry, but from provocation. Kyrgios didn't just criticize Djokovic, he targeted him. Loudly, relentlessly, sometimes brutally. It began with comments that blindsided Djokovic. During interviews, Kyrgios accused him of being fake, obsessive, and weirdly desperate for love. Insiders remember Djokovic hearing these remarks for the first time backstage. He laughed, one ATP employee recalled, but it wasn't real laughter. You could see the sting in his eyes. The hostility escalated during the 2021 COVID controversy. Djokovic, already under global attack, found himself mocked by Kyrgios on social media, in press conferences, even in late-night shows. Kyrgios called him a tool. He called his behavior embarrassing. He implied Djokovic was reckless, selfish, and out of touch, and each jab landed deeper because Djokovic was already carrying the weight of the world's judgment. But the moment that insiders say cut the deepest wasn't public. It was private. According to someone inside the locker room, Kyrgios once passed by Djokovic and muttered something sharp, almost venomous, under his breath. The words were never revealed, but witnesses said Djokovic's expression changed instantly. He was stunned, a trainer later said. It was the first time I saw him look genuinely hurt. For Djokovic, Kyrgios represented something he despised: mockery without consequence, talent without discipline, noise without respect. And yet, ironically, Kyrgios also admired Djokovic's resilience, a contradiction that only made their dynamic stranger more volatile, more painful. Everything shifted in 2022 when Kyrgios suddenly supported Djokovic during his deportation scandal, but insiders insist the damage was already done. Words once spoken don't disappear. Wounds once made don't fully heal. Number 5. Rafael Nadal. Among all the rivalries in modern tennis, none has defined Novak Djokovic's career more profoundly or more painfully than his rivalry with Rafael Nadal. To the world, they were gladiators, warriors, two opposites who pushed the sport to its poetic limits. But behind the respectful headlines and ceremonial handshakes, Djokovic carried something far heavier, a resentment forged through years of struggle, humiliation, and emotional scars left on the red clay of Paris and beyond. Their rivalry began with contrast. Nadal, the beloved hero with the relentless spirit. Djokovic, the challenger fighting for a place in a world split between Federer's elegance and Nadal's fire. Insiders recall early locker room moments when Djokovic felt like an outsider. The crowds cheering against him, the commentators praising Nadal's heart, while dismissing Djokovic as mechanical, cold, or artificial. He felt invisible, one former ATP staff member admitted, and Nadal's dominance only made the wound deeper. The French Open became the battlefield where that wound turned into something almost personal. Nadal didn't just beat Djokovic, he crushed him. Again. And again. And each defeat carved a new mark. Witnesses remember Djokovic's stare after the 2020 final, hollow, silent, a man confronting a mountain he could not move. But the moment insiders say cut deepest came in 2012 during a rain-soaked, chaotic final that Djokovic believed was taken from his hands when play was suspended with momentum on his side. He never forgot that, an insider whispered. He believed destiny betrayed him that day, and Nadal was the symbol of that betrayal. None of this was hatred born from cruelty. It was hatred born from collision, from being denied glory, identity, and peace by the same man, year after year. Nadal was the obstacle that wouldn't break, the rival who exposed Djokovic's insecurities, the shadow he could not outrun. When Novak Djokovic finished listing the 5 people who shaped the darkest, most turbulent periods of his life, the room fell into a heavy, breathless silence. But there was still one truth he had not spoken, a truth that tied all 5 names together in a way no headline, no interview, no commentator had ever understood. Because his list was never truly about hatred. It was about the moments that broke him, the battles that forced him to grow, and the people who pushed him toward the edge of himself. Rafael Nadal, the mountain he could not move, the rival who carved wounds on clay and seeded doubts deep within his identity. Nick Kyrgios, the provocateur who mocked him when he was most vulnerable, turning public ridicule into a weapon. Andy Murray, the mirror of everything he could have been, stealing moments of destiny that Djokovic believed were written for him. Roger Federer, the myth he could never escape, the icon whose shadow followed him even at the peak of his own greatness. And Scott Morrison, the political figure who transformed Djokovic from a champion into a global headline, stripping him of dignity in a moment meant for humiliation, not justice. Insiders say this list was less a confession of bitterness and more a reckoning. Each name represented a wound he carried through victories, scandals, and reinventions. Wounds he never allowed the world to see. As Djokovic leaned forward, finishing the final name, his tone shifted. It no longer held fire. It held release. They shaped me, he said quietly. Every one of them. The rivalries, the ridicule, the power. They forced me to understand who I am. And in that moment, the narrative transformed. This was not anger, not vengeance, not a declaration of enemies. It was a man confronting the truth the public never saw. That greatness is not forged by applause, but by scars. Because for Novak Djokovic, the greatest battles were never played under stadium lights. They were fought in silence, within the places the world never dared to look.